Hello everyone. This week I am joined by special guest Allina Cahill. Alina is a product genius in the startup world, and our topics range this episode from culture to market fit to companies being agile enough to too slow to burnout to society, mental health. You name it, we covered it, and it was actually hard to put it all into one episode. So there'll definitely be probably a part two. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today I am joined by special guest Allina Cahill. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
So, listeners that don't know, I was fortunate enough to be at Alina and Andrew's wedding earlier this year. You may have heard on an Out of Class episode that I did a quick trip to Texas, and it was for Alina's wedding. And you're tuning in from Germany today. Whereabouts in Germany are you guys living at the moment?
We're in Berlin.
Awesome. So, Alina, I'm going to try and do a bit of your rap sheet intro, and I am sure to miss a bunch. So after I give it my best shot, please feel free to fill in the blanks. So what is the number of cities you've lived in? So you're pretty much very much a global citizen. You've moved around. How many cities have you lived in?
5, I believe.
Okay, and across how many countries?
3 countries.
Awesome. And you are a get shit done type of person. From reading kind of your prep sheet and talking to and hearing from your family and friends earlier in this year, you are definitely a mover and shaker in all spaces of your life, in terms of personal world to career to your work to getting everything sorted for the wedding, kind of organizing that from across the world. And it kind of shows kind of looking through your career background, the roles you've had, right? So in terms of everything from operations to like product guru, from product manager to product operations to product lead. I'm assuming when you say product lead, and I'm going to ask this in a very naive way, it's from everything from start to finish, before the launches, the conception, all that, to it rolling to market and then tweaking as it goes. Is that correct? Or?
To be honest, in the tech world, the titles can mean slightly different things. So generally, a product lead is in seniority after a senior product manager, or sometimes parallel with a senior product manager, depends on the company. Some companies, they have direct reports. Other companies, they don't have direct reports. So it really depends. I think most commonly it can be thought of similar as a group product manager, where if you are an IC product manager or it's independent contributor, you don't have direct reports, you own a domain. Mm-hmm. And if you are on the lead product manager side, you own a space that has a few different related domains under it. And one way to think about this is, for example, what I've been working on most recently is a subscription product. And so I've been sitting on top of how do we acquire new users into that subscription, and also how do we retain users in that subscription, working together with the business team on what are the right mechanics of that subscription to also make sure not just that people are having a good time with it, but also it's financially viable for the company. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of that subscription, in a B2B to C marketplace, the businesses that we are collaborating with, what experience are they having with that subscription, and so on. And so it really is like full ecosystem, and that's been a really great challenge.
Yeah, awesome. So fill in the blanks, Alina. I'm sure I missed a lot there, and I know a little bit more about you than our listeners. So fill in the blanks and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in North Texas, in a field, essentially. And my mom is from Germany. My father is American. And that's a bit of a insight as to how I ended up in Berlin. I have family here in Germany, spent a lot of time visiting here. I was originally studying first medicine, ended up with a degree in psychology, and I was visiting my grandparents here, which I often do, and thought I would take like a few months off just for 6 months on my further studies. And I needed a job to finance that decision, so I was just applying anywhere that would accept me. And I got my foot in the door at Rocket Internet, which is a like startup incubator investor, and that job was in tech operations, and that was really my first experience with startups at all. Like I had no experience with this whatever. Like my parents did not work in this industry. I didn't have much exposure to it, which is like I think is also a really interesting thing. This is a hugely growing industry, and I know, not to date myself, but like it's been almost 10 years since I finished university, so it was also different then than it is now. But why did I never get really exposure to this growing industry? But that was my first touch point, and I realized, hey, I really like this. And so the rest of the last 8 years has been me navigating that industry, following up on opportunities as they arose, and one thing's led to another. I got some touch points in product management early in that journey and was like, hey, I could really see myself doing that and work towards that. And that's where I find myself now. So that's what I've been doing for the past 8 years.
Awesome. What drew you initially to the startup space, the startup tech e-com space? What drew you in? And I know having a few friends in that space, it's not for everyone. It can be electric in a good way, and I'm curious to go what kind of drew you, what kind of took your fancy to go, you know what, dive deeper down that rabbit hole.
Electric is a really great word for it. I think at the beginning it was a mix of interesting space that was unfamiliar to me, interesting people, good energy. And at this point, what I had done is I had worked in cafes, I had babysat, I had worked in restaurants, I did rounds in like hospitals, like shadowing people. But there was just this energy in the space where I was working, and I thought, this is really cool. I feel like I'm part of something. I want to see where that goes, and that's really been a good describer of my professional journey so far. It's just I want to see where this goes. I haven't looked too far in the future, but always just a little bit further than where I am now, and how is this engaging me? How is this serving me? How is this exciting me? And as my steps along the journey continued, that interesting problem side of things, that curiosity, that, hey, we're working on cool things, and there's some real energy about working on that, being part of the team that's solving these problems. Now, I'm sure that's applicable to a lot of different spaces, like having a science background, that also there's so much cool things happening right now in like the vaccine space. But for me, this was super tangible, and it drew me to it. The other thing I'll mention to listeners is something that has proven time and time again to be so helpful for me in that journey are the connections that you make along the way. So nobody asked for the advice, but my advice to you, if you're early in that journey, is build those relationships. And that doesn't have to be with the intention of like using them later, but invest a bit in getting to know people, building those relationships, take the coffee, because some of the coolest opportunities that I've had in my career so far have been through people that I got to know earlier in my career, that I crossed paths with, and an opportunity arose through them. So definitely don't underestimate that value in the tech industry.
That's super interesting. And it leads me to ask you a couple of questions with that. Do you think post-COVID, people put themselves less out there with, say, relationship building? And definitely, I mean, I'm assuming the same there. The startup space in Australia and early stage businesses is small, and especially the tech, and it's very like everyone knows everyone, right? So that relationship piece is key. Yeah, what do you think post COVID it's changed with people willing to put themselves out there? And or why do you think it's harder? Like you're a go-getter, right? But like sometimes I'm aware sometimes it doesn't come naturally for people, even though for me, it's a feel good across all of it. Like it's human connection, you're connecting, you're finding out, oh, how can we help each other? Or just even someone else in the industry. And maybe some 5-10 years down the track that connection might come in handy. Why do you think people potentially stray away from it? And do you think it's changed post-COVID?
Super interesting question. Let's talk about the industry first. So in the startup world, there's been a huge shift since like pre-COVID, early COVID to now in financing. So around like 2020, 2021, slightly before that as well, investors were super willing to throw money into the startup industry, frankly. And there was this hyper fixation on growth and a little bit less so on profitability. And this also meant that startups were hiring like crazy, salaries were crazy. And it was just this like loop of really good industry to be in that moment, right? And through the COVID period, for some companies like Zoom, for example, the use case for their product grew immensely. And so they really like rode the wave in that. But for others, this created a new challenge in user behavior that had changed, right? And financial situation also changed, like markets dropped a bit through the COVID period. And we see investors really take a step back and start to value like the profitability side of that duality much more. And it's pretty common in the industry for companies to focus first on the growth side of things, get the traction, prove this is going to work or this can work, and then pivot on to the profitability and bring that up to par too. Not everyone. Also, there are companies that focus on both at the same time, but that's a pretty common paradigm. And so that when the money dries up or the money flows a lot less willingly, that meant that there would be a lot less positions. That meant companies had layoffs, like many companies in the industry had big layoffs. And that's partly because they were bloated, if I'm honest. Like, at least that's what it seems like in the industry. Like, they had hired so many people that when it came to what they actually needed versus what they were gunning for beyond that because the money was coming in, they probably could run their operations with less people at a more financially viable pace. And so that's one thing that's changed in the business. I will say, or in the industry, one thing I will say is that it has improved since then. Like, I feel being in the industry today versus a year and a half ago, it's been a little bit more of a normalization. I would say maybe we had an overcorrection in the willingness to invest, take some risks, because in reality, angel investing, early seed investing, it's risky, right? Like, the payoff could be really good, but of course it's risky. Many, many more startups fail than are successful. And so in any case, though, the industry is certainly far from dead. And I feel like it's picking up again. So that's on the industry. Like, that's the environment that we're working in. Then the second is like the human psychology of it all. In many places in the world, people were in lockdown. You couldn't go out as much. varying levels of how strict that was. You couldn't see as many people. And I think for some people, they got used to that. And so I'm an example of this where